process. There we go. So, good morning again. My name is Neil McIntosh from the EUROPARC Federation. I'm the project manager of a life preparatory project called Life Edu for short. We're looking at ways to develop practical capacities for Natura 2000 managers and protected area managers so that they can improve the competencies that they need in order to be able to do their jobs well, basically. The project is 2/3 of the way through its life, and we're due to finish at the end of July in 2021. So currently we're very busy delivering some courses, and we have some really excellent results to be able to share in due course. This webinar today is one of a series which we're organizing through the project. And we're delighted to have Thomas Campagnaro from the University of Padua, who are also a partner to the project as well. But before I introduce Thomas, please allow me just to say a very few words about EUROPARC. Some of you may be familiar with the EUROPARC Federation, but we're a federation which is founded by its members. We're legally based in Germany, but we work internationally. And our goal is to improve the protected area management across Europe by working internationally, networking, exchanging ideas, and exchanging knowledge. We work together on specific themes related to protected area management. So that includes sustainable development, tourism, recreation, relationships with agriculture, a whole host of very important topics. You can find out much more about the EUROPARC Federation in the link that would have been sent to you as part of this webinar. So please take your time to look at that when you have a moment. So I'm going to now introduce Thomas, or rather I'm going to hand over to Thomas and let Thomas introduce himself. Thomas has very kindly agreed to make a presentation today, which we hope you're all going to find interesting and informative. As I say, we'll work through the presentation and then take some questions at the end. So over to you, Thomas.
Okay, so thank you, Neil. Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. First of all, I want to be sure that you can hear me and you can see the screen that I shared.
Yes.
Good. Yes, thank you, Neil. Thank you also to EUROPARC. And as Neil said, I want to also thank the Life Natura 2000 project to have the opportunity to share this presentation that derives from a set of research activities and more technical activities that we are being carrying out in the last years here at the University of Padua at the Department of Land, Environment, Agriculture and Forestry. I'm currently a researcher here at the university. I also have some courses related more to forest management and applied silviculture. I'm going to present today this work that we prepared together with Tommaso Cizzia, that is a professor here at the university. He also teaches a course called the Natura 2000 Management, so specifically, and this course is taught in English. The aim of today, of the presentation of today, I can show you here the outline. First of all, as also we can understand from the main title of the presentation, I want to share some overviews and some aspects related to specific examples related to positive and negative cases, also negative cases. So the failures not only the success stories, and to understand the important aspects, the important lessons that we have learned up to now regarding Natura 2000 and the implementation of the two Natura 2000 Natura directives. Most of these aspects were touched in a recent publication that, together with Tommaso and other colleagues from other research bodies of different entities in Europe, but also from other researchers outside Europe, we tried to see which were these lessons that Natura 2000 could give generally also outside Europe, with the aim of increasing protected land. And as you can see from the presentation, you can access this article that is published in Bioscience because it's free as a free access. Then I will go through two examples that shows the link and the integration between the synergies between research, but also collaboration and communication, and Natura 2000. The first case represented by a particular subspecies, the golden Alpine salamander, and the process that led to the identification of specific conservation measures for this species. And then I would like to introduce a recent project, a live project called Brenta 2030, that is related to a set of innovative approaches that we want to apply along a river that is a Natura 2000 site, and we will see it as last example in the connection between research, communication, collaboration, and participation. So to start, first of all, what makes Natura 2000 an important example, not only for us, but also outside Europe? The dimension, of course, and first of all, what is Natura 2000 network? So it's a set of protected sites according to different directives, the Habitats and the Bird directives. The Habitats directive, we have a site of community importance, and when we have conservation measures, we have the special conservation areas, whereas under the Birds directive, we have the special protection areas. So these are the different terminologies with which we define the different sites. Of course, we can have sites, Natura 2000 sites, that are designated according to both the directives. So in total, we have around 1.3 million square kilometers. To give an idea, the overall area of EU 28, the data that I have is around something more than 4 million square kilometers, the total terrestrial area. So it is roughly 80% of it, and 99% of the marine areas of our European Union member states. You can see here on the right a map, one of the most recent ones, but referring to 2019. So we have still the United Kingdom. And you can see that we can have different countries that are covered differently. So, for example, we can have countries that are covered around 8% of their total land area, such as Denmark, or up to 38% as Slovenia, and also 37%, if I'm not wrong, with Croatia. So we have different importance in terms of area covered, and these sites are designated because they host different habitats, and these are listed in the Habitats Directive in the Annex 1, and are in total 233. And you can see then here also the list of the animal species and plant species for which we can have this designation of Natura 2000 sites. So we have a number of conservation targets for the different Natura 2000 sites. One important aspect when, for example, we were discussing with researchers outside Europe, the first point was that Natura 2000 sites are not established, are not designated only in remote areas where we do not have human activities, as it could be the case in many other parts of the world. But instead we have, in many cases, the presence of human activities, so social and economic interests. And this makes, of course, the Natura 2000 sites heterogeneous not only from an environmental point of view, but also from a social and economic point of view. It is important, in fact, to understand that within these sites we have other aspects really important concerning, for example, different ecosystem services, such as those related to cultural and spiritual services, because we can have cultural, spiritual, historical, and archaeological sites within these areas. When looking to the scientific literature and the comparison with other systems all around the world, the connectivity of this network is reported to be quite good. Of course, we will need further improvement from this point of view. In fact, the research highlights that progress is needed in certain situations to connect certain sites, but some, for example, nice examples are the transboundary connections between different Natura 2000 sites between different member states. Another aspect is that we are protecting not only, as I was saying, remote habitats or pristine habitats, but we are protecting habitats and habitats for species that are there because of human interventions. I'm thinking about different types of grasslands that are maintained by mowing, that if this practice would cease, we will have the spontaneous reforestation in many cases. So in many cases, these habitats are strictly linked to human activities, as just said. Furthermore, there is some concern regarding the necessity of enlarging, of course, the network in trying to include other sites in order to include the species of the different annexes, or also some researchers have highlighted the necessity maybe to update the lists of habitats and species for which to designate our sites. Here, I wanted to show you a first link between research, scientific research, and the Habitats Directive and Natura 2000 in particular. So I apologize if it's not really clear, but the image on the left is one of the most recent regarding the increase over time of the cover of these sites. The different curves represent that we are considering sites designated under the Birds Directive or the Habitats Directive, or in the case of both. But what is interesting to see is the other two graphs, the one in the middle and the one on the right, that represents what we did is we searched some online databases regarding scientific articles, and we searched for those articles, in the first case, that mentioned Natura 2000. And we can see here from the graph in the middle that our scientific articles dealing with this topic increased really sharply from 2000 onwards, really representing nearly an exponential curve. And similarly, if we do a similar search in these databases regarding for example, Natura 2000, but specifically linking to the presence of bird species listed in Annex 1 of the Birds Directive. So we see also an increase in research for this more specific aspect. So this represents the increase that of interest of research, but also maybe the integration, the derivation of data regarding Natura 2000 from scientific activities and researches. To highlight the importance, of course, if we look to the Habitats Directive, we have an article that underlines, so Article 18, that underlines the importance of the scientific research to achieve the general aims of the Habitats Directive. And so the importance to achieve a favorable conservation status for habitats and species. And so the importance of encouraging these research activities, especially also for other aspects such as surveillance of the conservation status and of the species and habitats within our sites. Here again, some synergies. So, for example, the data that we have in the standard data form. The standard data form is like the ID of each Natura 2000 sites, in which we have a number of information regarding the site, the habitats, the species within them, the different pressures and threats. And in this case, research, scientific research can help in filling the gaps and having such updated information. The same regarding the reporting, the periodic reporting every 6 years on the conservation status by member states for habitats and species. So also in this case, research is playing an important role, and hopefully in the future even more important in terms of contribution. And then another important aspect is the relation with the appropriate assessment. We know that any plan or project that is likely to cause an impact on habitats and species and on the integrity of a Natura 2000 site should undergo this procedure. And in this case, in the more complex situation, of course, research and the universities can play a role in helping and understanding whether these impacts are there or not. And of course, we have also a number of guidance documents, best practices in which scientific works are mentioned and taken as a reference. Now, of course, having said this, also the education in conservation science is really important. So linking the results of research to sharing this knowledge, especially within, for example, universities or schools, in order to improve conservation sites. Of course, I mentioned many important and positive synergies. Of course, we know that much is still to be done in terms of knowledge, for example, on the presence of species, on the characteristics and importance of the habitats and their functioning and their conservation status. And here I just reported one recent work by Lison and others regarding the comparison of presence data of species, bat species, from the standard data form, so recorded as official, and known that are from national atlases. And the case in this study focused on Spain. And we can see that there is no, or at least not always, we will have a same number of species, regardless if there are Annex 2 or Annex 4 or Annex 4 or 5. If we compare the number reported in the standard data form and the number reported in this case, a national atlas. So it's important to collect all the information available and to integrate and communicate this type of information in order that we have this updated information for our sites. One important aspect is for Natura 2000 and for its acceptance and its proper implementation is the engagement and participation by the wider public, also by different stakeholders groups. It's important to underline that in many cases in the previous steps of implementation, we had really strong oppositions from different stakeholders groups in different countries. One famous example is for that in France, that at the beginning we have strong opposition, first of all from, for example, the forestry sector. But with time, we understood the importance of engaging, informing the wider public and also the different stakeholders regarding the process of implementation, but also the management of these sites. And this was an important aspect highlighted by one document regarding the fitness of purpose of our two directives. So this importance of participation and involvement if we want to address the main issues regarding the interaction between our presence and activities and our interest with those related to the conservation of habitats and species. Another important aspect that came out when discussing with other researchers from outside Europe is something related more, related also of being within the European Union, so the legal context, so the importance of having this legal framework that enables to have court actions through an important and recognized steps. And this is important if we think about all the number of issues and conflicts that have arisen and will arise due to the nature of our sites. As I was saying before, most of our sites, a high number of our sites, are in areas where we have important economic and social interests. So here we can have a rising of different conflicts. And so in cases of non-compliance with the directives, not only the European Commission can take before the European Court of Justice single member states, but this can be done also, for example, by single individuals. So we have a number of, I would say, positive examples which taking to court enabled to stop some, for example, projects or plans that were thought to be detrimental for the integrity of the different sites. There are a number of cases related, for example, of road projects rather than other forestry activities. And the other important aspect is that in this way we have a connection between lawyers and scientists looking to law, but also managers and researchers and conservationists. So this importance of communicating between different expert groups. One, of course, important aspect when we were discussing with, as I was saying, with different with other colleagues, was about the economic relevance and the financial aspects related to the maintenance and establishment, management of these sites. We know that here we have some numbers, but we know that the costs are really high to maintain certain habitats and certain species. But also we know that within our sites, we have a number of different ecosystem services that we will need to value and that are there because we are maintaining the presence of these habitats and the characteristics of the different habitats for the different species. One aspect that our colleagues underlined when we were explaining what is Natura 2000 and what are the directives is the importance of having some co-funding mechanisms. So, as in the case of live projects. And this is really relevant because then we can have different co-funding measures and programs, not only the LIFE project, but those related, for example, rural development and other cases. What it is important, in my opinion, also is the prioritized action framework that are foreseen by the Habitats Directive, and are these documents in which member states or single regions can underline, can point out the priorities in terms of conservation measures for habitats and species. And the consideration of these in the future co-funding period, so between 2021 to 2027, it is likely to be really important. And for this reason, we will need to have these documents prepared in order to have a strategic investment in where really we need this type of economic support to the management. And here, another graph taken from a really recent and interesting publication, still regarding here the number of LIFE projects for different member states, for different habitats, whether these were in a favorable or bad conservation status. And we can see from the graph that we do not have a real strong difference between the number of projects, LIFE projects, dealing with habitats at the favorable conservation status rather than those at the backward conservation status. That, of course, without going in depth, we can understand that those in bad conservation status would need to be prioritized. Of course, then we will need to see case by case, but generally speaking, we would expect to see more projects related to these type of habitats. To conclude this first part, what we did with our colleagues, for example, was to point out some important lessons that could help in expanding the protected areas, not only in Europe, but also outside Europe. And these are some points that we have already touched. So the importance of a legal framework, the importance of the link with scientific research, of having specific conservation features to be protected, and that these can be identified and can be assessed in terms, for example, of conservation status. And this, for example, term conservation status means something really specific concerning the Habitats Directive. So we are building some common language in terms of from this point of view. So here with conservation status, we mean something really specific. And the other relevant aspect is the inclusion of the different stakeholder groups, and also, if we want to upscale, not at the national level, but at continental level, for example, the importance of including all the nations and countries from the first steps in terms of implementation and the identification of the different sites, but also on the conservation features that we want to protect. Of course, all this will build in political trust and sense of common nature conservation values. So the importance of the wider public being aware of the importance of these sites. And overall, of course, the importance of policy coordination and the relation with the possible co-funding. So, having said this, I want to present the case studies. This first case study, as I said, regards a subspecies that is the golden Alpine salamander. It is found in northeastern Italy. and was first described in 1982, so it was described really recently, and it is part of the Annex 2 of the Habitats Directive, and it's a priority species. So we understand that for this species, the Italian member state had to propose and designate a Natura 2000 site. So regarding this species, some peculiar aspects of it is that it is found really in a small area, not more the range of this species, not of the populations of this species, not more than 70 square kilometers. We can find it in an area of around 20 square kilometers. And what is interesting is that it doesn't move so much. So the data on this species show that the maximum distance of recapture of the same individual was 30 meters. So they seem to live in a really small portion of land. And the other aspect is that are difficult to spot because they are usually within different shelters. And why we are looking to this specific case? Because around 2012, there was a concern by a group of herpetologists and conservationists, but also some politicians, regarding the possible impacts of forestry activities within one of the core areas where this subspecies was found. Because especially there were no scientific evidence of if there was an impact or not, in terms, of course, of first killing this small animal, or the effects brought by modification of the habitats, for example, the soil compaction. We must underline that in these forests that are mature forests mixed with Norway spruce, silver fir, and beech, that in the area we have a continuous cover forestry practice, so close to nature forestry practice, in which we have specific silviculture intervention ranging from the shelter wood, but also the single tree or group selection systems that are based in, for example, in the second case, in the extraction of single trees. And for example, the reliance on natural regeneration and not, for example, artificial regeneration in these cases. So with this problem, the region stopped the forestry activities, and after a certain period, we had the opportunity to collaborate with the region, the Veneto region, and other groups from the University of Padua. So a group represented by biologists expert in this species and the biology ecology of the species, and another group more expert in forest management and the habitat futures of the forest. So here you can see the central map indicates the Natura 2000 site, that is the one of the Altopiano di Asiago site. You can see that we are relatively near to Venice. We are roughly 2 hours by car from Venice, and we are in the Alps in this case. So the first activities was to survey where the species was, and this was done by taking as a reference the single trees. This because of the characteristics of the area, and also of the biology of the species and of the local population. So in the first year of this research, we collected data on the presence and other aspects of the individuals of this subspecies, and on different habitat features, for example, amount of dead wood, presence of stones that could be a shelter for this species, but also other information regarding the vegetation present, for example, in the herbaceous area. And this was done by surveying the areas around the single trees. After this first period, so these first surveys, we knew where these individuals were compared to the different trees in our forest areas. And what we did together, of course, with the colleagues of the Department of Biology, so experts on the species, but also with other stakeholders, are the owners, as the owners of the areas that are the, in this case was the municipality of Asiago, but also other neighboring municipalities that may face the same problems, and also other regional and provincial authorities regarding especially the forest management aspects. We decided how to proceed in order to understand whether we had an effect of forest operations on the presence of the species. So we decided to cut and leave certain trees in cut and control depending on the presence and absence of the species. And you can see here the numbers. So 11 trees were cut where the species was subspecies was found, and 11 as control were trees that were left there, and for which we had in the neighboring area the individuals of this subspecies. And also 6 trees were cut and left that where we did not have the presence of this subspecies. Now I show you this short video in which we represent the timber extraction that you can see was carried out during winter, so between November, between November and December, with frozen soil and with snow. We know from the biologists that during this period the species is quiescent under shelter, so it's not active. And this was done also as a precautionary aspect, because we knew that the extraction of timber could be one of the specific actions that could have an effect on these species. So regarding the main results, what we saw, even though in this case we were looking just 1 year before and after the intervention, we saw that the number of individuals per tree didn't change, even though these were cut. So it didn't change, the number of trees didn't decrease from the first to the second year, so after the intervention. And where the trees were felled, we did not have a decrease in the number of individuals. We have a slight, but not significant decrease when we are looking to the different tracks. So we need to understand that maybe compaction may play a role in the absence of these individuals. So if we look to the intervention, the results, the idea of carrying out the activities with frozen soil and also with soil covered by snow gives a short option of in terms of forest operations, because of course after a certain date we will have heavy snows, and it would not be anymore possible to carry out these activities for a number of technical but also for safety reasons. So the operability window is really short if this type of activities we want to carry out. So after this research and long discussion within the different groups and the necessity of setting the different conservation measures for the different sites of the region, we set a number of conservation measures targeting these subspecies. And the first one and most important is a conservation measure deriving from the information of this study, so that timber extraction cannot be carried out between April and October. Here you can see the specific dates. So, and these are the dates in which we are sure that the subspecies is not active. Of course, with also some other requirements regarding the use of trails and tracks already present there. And I'm not reporting here, there are a number of other conservation measures that were found to be important deriving from the research that we carried out. For example, the importance of leaving in after the intervention dead wood and different types of logs on the ground, and in terms of also different dimensions. So to conclude this part, what it was really interesting for the different years of this research activity and then the process leading to the specific conservation measures was the collaboration, of course, from different research groups specialized in different topics that is not always simple and straightforward, and this is really important to underline that instead in these cases we had a important collaboration together also with other public bodies and agencies related to nature conservation, but also to forestry. And finally, so different involvement of the different stakeholders that had different interests in these areas, and also the importance of communicating the results of this research, the steps carried out, and then, of course, the process leading to the conservation measures in public events. So we had in 2018 a public event in which we presented the study, the results, in which other experts from the neighboring region where there is a small population and where some other groups are carrying out similar research were invited to discuss about, of course, the research and the future steps, and also to inform the citizens regarding the importance of conserving the habitat and conserving these species. So moving to the second case study, this will be brief because it relates to a recent LIFE project that started in the middle of last year. So we are still at the first stages. This project relates to a Natura 2000 site that is the Grave Zone Umide della Brenta, still in the Veneto region. You can see here that we are, even though it is not shown, we are in the continental geographical region here. And we are nearer to Venice. And we are along this site, goes along the part of the Brenta River. And the site is long 70 kilometers. One important aspect regarding the governance and is that we have 16 municipalities, and this site covers and is found in 2 different provinces. So you can see that from the administrative level, we have a multiplication of bodies and entities that have some interest in the area. And furthermore, on the right, you can see the map of the site with the different habitats. I apologize because it's a bit small, but the idea is that we have a number of different habitats, mostly related to wetlands or to the river habitats, but also to alluvial forests. And we have a number of animal and plant species according to those listed in the different annexes of the Habitats and Birds Directive. And this site is really important for nesting birds, but also for migratory birds. What it makes this area really a difficult, first of all, I wanted to highlight the different partners here to exemplify the presence of the university, so research, interest and education. Then we have an agency related more to agriculture and the environment, management of agriculture. We have single municipalities, we have private consultant companies, and we have a number of agencies and bodies, public agencies and bodies that deal with the water resource in terms of planning how to use the water resource and the management of the water resource in this area. This because we have a number of different issues. The most important ones are related to the quality and quantity of water, because this area gives roughly around 30% of the drinking water used by the region. And so we have some issues from studies in the last years, on the last period, with the reduction of the water table height, with the reduction in the water flow, loss of springs. These are all recorded in the last years. Then the presence of different interests in terms, for example, of intense agriculture, the issue regarding possible pollution, for example, related to the use of pesticides and other chemicals in agriculture, habitat fragmentation in terms of the different habitats that we have seen, especially wetlands, but also different alluvial and riparian forests. And overall, as I was saying, highlighting the different administrative competencies and that have an implication in the governance of the Natura 2000 site. So, for example, here we do not still have the Natura 2000 management plan. The aim of the project here, looking to this issue, was first of all to maintain and increase the green and blue infrastructure, tackling specific habitats and species that were listed as a priority in the prioritized action framework, so in the PAF. But the other important aspect was related to improving the governance and the management of these areas. So the need of researching and implementing new financial mechanisms regarding the water resources, so specifically looking to kind of payments for ecosystem services to be entered in the water tariff, and the identification, therefore, of a novel approach in the governments in order to make more aware and increase the participation of different stakeholders groups, as the one represented by the agriculture sector, but also by the wider public in terms of the citizens that may use this area. Here I grouped, we have a number of different actions. I don't want to go through all of them, but here these are 3 groups as the different aims, so those more related to the conservation and maintenance of habitats and habitats of species and different characteristics. So the importance of updating the standard data form, of monitoring the habitats and species after a number of restoration projects that we have there, and the importance of integrating Natura 2000 conservation measures and objectives within other planning tools. And this is research that is innovative. We want to understand how we can integrate this in different existing planning tools. Regarding governance, as I said, different approaches in order to involve different stakeholders. Another interesting aspect is the interest in trying to have a surveillance system in place that currently is not there. And to conclude, the importance of an innovative approach to identify some financial scheme in order to include within the water tariff, so the payment that we have for having the drinking water, to have some portion dedicated to the management and maintenance of the different habitats, because these are maintaining the water resource through these ecosystem services that is provided within the area. So, as I said, we had the first steps, and with the situation of COVID, we also had some, not delays, some short delays. And first of all, this was due to the launching event that was foreseen, for example, in March. But we are going to have this in 10 days, so on June 9, and this will be a virtual event. So everyone can participate. I also highlighted here the link. And the other interesting aspect is that, of course, all the citizens are invited via different platforms. There is the Facebook, the site, website, Twitter, and so on. But the subdivision of different virtual groups in which specific themes will be touched in order to understand also how the wider public understands and feels the proposals and the activities that the project wants to carry out. So I hope it was interesting, and thank you very much. And now I think I pass the word to Neil, and we can have the discussion on this seminar. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Thomas. Thank you very much. If you wouldn't mind just stopping sharing your screen.
Yep.
That would be great. Thank you very much. For me, I think the interesting thing is the contrast between the two types of case studies that you mentioned and referred to in your presentation. One being very, very small and the other being super big. So I think that's a very interesting dimension and opportunity to compare the importance of scientific research in both types of case study. But let's see if anyone has any questions. I can see some on the chat. There was a question quite early on, Thomas, which I thought was particularly interesting, especially when working in a sort of multi-sectoral or relationship where there are different types of stakeholder involved. How do you make scientific research meaningful to different types of organizations in different sectors or different stakeholder groups or community groups? What are the challenges does that bring?
So the challenge is related to the multidisciplinarity of these aspects. So as I was saying with the first case, and I highlighted, first of all, the collaboration between different research groups, that is not always so obvious. So the importance of having research groups looking to or expert in the biology of the species, expert more on, for example, in that case was forest management, but we can have as in the case of the Life Brenta, groups related to social science and economic evaluation of the different ecosystem services, and having said this, also related to groups expert in social science, we have groups expert in communication. So these groups and these experts help researchers that maybe are good in understanding the ecology of a species to try to pass this to the wider public or to the different stakeholder groups. So I don't know if I answered to this aspect, but I think that overall we need a broad approach, trying to include different fields of expertise, and know that when we want to tackle different stakeholders or the wider group, wider groups or wider citizens, we will also need experts in doing this that teach us how to do it. As in the case, for example, where we started and we are doing now to use these tools, informatic tools to convey our research.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. Yeah, I think there's an important point about the dialogue involved within those types of relationships, whether it's at a very small local scale, as in the case study with the salamander, you know, working with individuals and local interest groups, hobby groups, if you like, and then scaling that dialogue up into a very sort of formal exchange of information and priorities within the Life Brenta case study. There are two very extreme sort of levels of scale, but at the heart of both, whether it's the very small scale, local scale, or a much larger scale project, and the quality of the dialogue and the information exchanges is really central to that. Yep. There's one or two questions from someone in the webinar called Usalem. Usalem, I'm sorry, I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. You've written 3 questions in the group chat, but if you would like to just say them, that would also be good. No? Maybe there's a problem with the microphone. But of the 3 questions, question 1 from Usalem is for studies where there's synergies of data on species, how do you overcome the problem of the lack of data, which, you know, especially when there's a lot of data required in order to make some scientific judgments?
This is a difficult question. I mean, it's not simple answer. Of course, we know that, for example, for species, we know that there are some groups that are, some taxa that are less studied than others. So, for example, we will need to focus maybe on these. But of course, the one aspect is that there is also a lack of experts of certain taxa group. So we will need also to have a broader approach, starting from the education, so for example, from the university. And this is happening, tackling, for example, specifically the issue of Natura 2000 or related to monitoring these specific species or habitats. Yes, the lack of data, of course, only with time and resources, we will be able to fill this gap. There will be some priorities. Still, there are some groups in which we do not have their presence or the knowledge on conservation status. But I must say that another issue is rather that of collecting already available data, because there are research groups and experts that are carrying out specific activities concerning habitats and species. The data is there, but maybe the data is not translated and taken to the areas where it is useful for Natura 2000. So included within the standard data form, or fed to those groups that are preparing, for example, the reporting at the national level for the reporting Article 17. So one aspect is that, and also so to collect already the available data. That is something really important that we are, for example, trying here at the university, but is of course not simple, because, for example, much data is still reported on a piece of paper. So when we want to collect this large amount of data, we need geo databases. We will need to have people that translate this and report this in the geo databases, and so on. So there are many different issues that depend, of course, on the context, depends on the taxa that we consider, or on the habitats. But there are, and therefore there are different possible solutions.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. There's a growing list of questions, so we'll do our best to field them and answer them. One question in relation to a specific category of stakeholder, especially within the Life Brenta project, Thomas, the relationship with farmers. How challenging is it to communicate with that group of stakeholders? Would you be able to answer that? Or
So,
share some views?
I can give some views. Of course, I cannot enter in the specifics in this case, because we are at the first stages. I must say that we are also relatively lucky in this case, because we have some direct relationships with people representing farmers. So with the association representing farmers in the area. And we have already a dialogue. So we had already some meetings with them. They are already willing to share, for example, information and data in order to understand where are the critical areas in terms of intensive agriculture and so on. So it seems that from this starting, we have a positive feeling of the relationship and the participation and communication and collaboration with this group.
Thanks, Thomas. And provocation question here from Wojciech. The science and research behind Natura 2000 has obviously moved on considerably over the last almost 30 years, 40 years. But what are the new views that Natura 2000 is bringing to the table? Or is it just more of the same? I think you mentioned in your one of your presentations at the very start, Thomas, there's still a need for more information. But perhaps there's a question there about when is the information that we have enough? And how do we apply it? Is it the quality of the information, or do we just continue gathering more and more and more information, which is particularly of interest to a scientific academic community, but not that particularly interesting for others, perhaps?
I think that yes, I understand the question, meaning that, for example, we still look to habitats, look into a list of species, or look into the phytosociological origin of, for example, of the habitats. But at the same time, for example, it is required to have information regarding the functioning and the structure of the different habitats. And so, in this sense, research is going on. So trying to understand the networks between different taxa, the interactions that we have, for example, with the importance of pollinators, link between pollinators, the habitats, and the different plant species. These must be included, in my opinion, within the concept of the functioning of habitats, so reporting on this. So these, for example, are novel aspects of the research that are useful. And having said this, for example, the new, just to say, the new format of the prioritized action framework requires to highlight if there are specific measures that may have implication on pollinators. And therefore, to understand also this, maybe research will then try to understand the networks and the importance of this. We also trying to understand not only changes in species, but changes on the characteristics of the different communities in terms of traits that the species have. So certain species may be just to see if there are changes in the number of nitrogen fixers or nitrogen demanding species, and so on. And these, of course, are fields that are developing, and in my opinion, they are linked not to the definition per se or identification of a habitat or of a species, but to better understand how the environment, so these habitats and habitats of species, function. I hope I answered to the question of Wojciech.
We'll see. Wojciech is typing quite extensively in the chat, so please let us know, Wojciech, if you think that answers your question. Even a thumbs up will do, or a thumbs down. There's quite a number of questions, Thomas. Sorry, they're all directed at you, but hey, that's your job.
Yeah.
Mostly in relation to the human dynamics involved. I think, it's there's a really important point, and again, it's well illustrated with the two case studies that you've mentioned, that whilst Natura 2000 is a network of ecologically connected sites, it's also very much a human network, a network of humans. From whatever sector or field of interest they come, whether they live in a Natura 2000 site, whether they're a forester, a farmer, whether they're from a particular scientific specialism. How do we ensure that what is often written on paper in terms of best practices, how do we actually use that and apply that in a very practical sense?
But
this is a really $1 million question. So
yes,
if you answer this, Thomas, then you're free to go for the weekend.
So I think that the answer stays mainly in the social science aspect. So a bit on the if I'm not wrong, first or second question. Of course, we have different fields in which we are developing different approaches in order to ensure this. So in order to have a proper stakeholder involvement and to make the technical or scientific information available, useful and understandable to the different stakeholders. I must say that this, yes, it's a really complex question. That there are different ways, maybe that even indirect ways that we do not know. For example, the use of smartphone apps with open that, for example, are used to take a picture of a species and then recognize that species. That can be done by citizens. And maybe with events related to this, we can make aware more of the people and the citizens that are using this app regarding more the aspects related to management. So try to make them aware that certain activities are important to maintain, to have that variety of plants in that grassland, rather than having that butterflies, or having the possibility of knowing that there is that butterflies or other aspects. So I think there are many different tools, of course, of which I'm not an expert. I'm not saying just the smartphone app, but also ways of entertaining and engaging with the different groups. That we, of course, we understand, and we understand with our life project, the Natura 2000, that we need to tackle this. So one important aspect for a successful implementation of Natura 2000 is to translate in different words the aspects that we know regarding the importance of managing and protecting to the different groups.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. Yeah, that was a bit of a answers on a postcard question. It's not an easy one to answer. There's a question here from, well, two questions here from Brady. The first of which I think you'd already answered. In relation to the salamander case study, did the results inform the management or decision making in the Natura 2000 site? Well, I think your case study said it did. There was a law that was actually created on the basis of the results in Veneto region. But
yes.
Perhaps more interestingly, based on the experience and knowledge, what are the most important steps to help ensure that research can inform decision-making in and around Natura 2000 sites? I think that's really quite interesting.
Yeah, the most important steps is that, of course, I must say that to be clear, to send clear messages, and to highlight, for example, that as usual it is in research, we are talking about, in many cases, for example, probabilities rather than a yes or no answer. To make sure that this concept is well understood and accepted, because things are like that. Of course, we can help in the decision making by, yeah, I must say that I think that this and the other answers helped a bit in answering this aspect. No, so then also trying to put together and inform also the wider public, that then will have an influence in turn on different stakeholders and on the decision-making people.
And in terms of influencing the wider public, especially with the Brenta project, Thomas, you were saying that there could be the possibility, at least, of some sort of financial incentive, so that the public would potentially pay a little bit more in order to ensure the quality of the water resource that they would receive?
I don't know. So I am not sure that is will be a bit more. It's just that in the calculation of the tariff, so in the cost of the drinking water, to include the value of the ecosystem services, so or that ensure the provision of this resource, and then to have a part of this amount that is calculated set for the management and maintenance and restoration of the different habitats within the site. It is a really challenging aim. We will see how it works, but it's something really interesting because one issue, as I was saying, is how we can fund the different activities, so restoration and management of the area. So this could, we hopefully will be one possible answer.
And I think that very issue is something which is going to be increasingly a question which regional and national governments are going to have to at least reflect upon as we go through the coming 10-year period. You know, to what extent are people willing to pay for nature and the services that they provide? And certainly in terms of the Brenta project, there's a very clear link. I mean, that project is directly related to the implementation of the Italian prioritized action framework.
The other aspects that are related to this project is that, for example, we are targeting the different stakeholders groups in order to, and this may answer also some of the previous question a bit more. So also decision makers. So in terms of regional representatives, then also events targeted to technicians in the different municipalities, that they will need to be more and more aware about the, for example, legal procedures related to Natura 2000, rather than representatives of the agriculture sector or wider public. Also to another group who are students from the university. So, for example, the areas where we are going to carry out restoration action will be some areas where we are going to take our students to show them in the field what is happening. At the same time, we are doing this also for elementary schools and other schools. And these are all will be targeted in different ways in relation to the different interests and aspects that we want to carry on and make them aware of.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Thomas. There's one or two questions, but I'm going to pick up particularly on the one from Jaap, who is from Denmark, and he's saying that, you know, after more than 25 years of paper protection, Natura 2000 sites are still in unfavorable conservation condition. At what point do we take some action, or at what point is there some action is it possible to take some action, especially at EU level? And you were referring in your earlier slides, Thomas, to the European Court of Justice. Jaap's particular point is that the condition of many Natura 2000 sites in Denmark, but also in the Netherlands as well, you know, and elsewhere in Europe, that nitrogen deposition is a material factor, and it has been the subject, I think, of several adjudications by the European Court of Justice.
Yeah, so I must say that I don't know this specific topic regarding the aspects of pesticides and fertilizers. And then also I'm not really aware of the specific condition of Denmark. I just knew, what one information data that came to my eye was the one of 80%. That is the member state with the lowest proportion. So surely I must say that if we compare this with other countries, it will need some improvement. But having said this, it depends also on the different habitats and species that are really there in Denmark. The other thing is that, yes, I think that improvements, we have seen some improvements in the implementation, also in the conservation status and of certain species. We also understood that for many species we had a positive effect of Natura 2000, not only those, for example, protected, directly protected or listed in the annexes. So yes, I have a positive view for the future. Specifically the case of Denmark, I'm not aware of. I don't know also the progress in this case in the 25 years. I don't think these were, I mean, I don't think that there were not progresses during the time. Yes, I agree with what you highlighted, Neil, the importance of the legal framework and the importance of this. We saw that with other cases, with other examples, that this could lead to some improvements, or at least to avoid some strong conflicts. Yes, I hope to have answered at least partially to the question of Jaap.
Very good, Thomas. I think you made an excellent stab at it, that's for sure. Yeah, there's another point raised here in the chat about the need for not so much sort of interpretations of what Natura 2000 is from singular perspectives, so from a research, a scientific perspective, or from a management perspective, or from a particular stakeholders' perspective, but the need for more interactive, adaptive management approaches where, you know, the various stakeholders really engage meaningfully in increasing understanding about how to implement Natura 2000. And I think that's a point we would certainly want to echo. It's not all about silo mentalities. And then, sorry, I'm doing my very best to try and address the questions, but also conscious of the time. There was another question directly to me about whether Brexit is going to have any impact on Natura 2000. I'll resist the temptation to say either yes or no to that. I think it's far too complicated, but and also I am merely the moderator of this particular webinar, not here to give my opinion on that. And then maybe if we can...
No, I just want to add this.
Thomas?
With just for Jaap, that the UK had 8% of cover of their land with the Natura 2000. So Denmark was together with the UK up to 2019. Now no. But yeah, the thing is that for sure some statistics will change, but I'm also pretty sure that the framework and the improvements that are related to Natura 2000 are appreciated also in the UK, and the approach and how it is done, it will be replicated even though the Brexit. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Thomas. And then maybe in view of the time, just one final question. Again, it was from Usalem. He posed 3 questions. We've answered one already, and we just don't have the time to get round to the second. But the third one is interesting in relation to the impact of COVID. Do we think that that is likely to have, or basically, what type of effect is that going to have on Natura 2000 management?
I will try to know. I will say the same things that you said before with the Brexit, because it's difficult it's really difficult to say. What we can say is what we observed, or at least what we think we observed from the media during this period. For example, that with less pressure, we have some more spottings of different animals and some effects related to direct measures of pollutions in large cities and in large areas. But then it's really too difficult to say.
And too early.
Too early, yes, too early, too difficult, and I think we are still in the emergency, and it's difficult to see the connections between the
Exactly. I mean, there's anecdotal evidence that nature is actually doing better, because there's less sort of human disturbance in protected areas and parks and nature reserves and sites. But we'll see in the longer term what the likely consequences are going to be. I think also there's a really important consideration for the park management authorities or the nature conservation managers about how they're going to deal with the exit from the sort of lockdown period, which we've all been enduring, and what the sort of consequences of that are. To use that horrible phrase, we're definitely likely to encounter a new reality, not only in daily life, but also in terms of nature management in the future.
Something that maybe is not directly related, but it's related, for example, to what we are doing today. So what I saw with also the everyday work is that we will have more and more opportunities to have contacts, seminars, meetings via internet. And this increased maybe the possibility of engaging through this instrument with the wider citizens that are using. I'm thinking specifically to youngsters now, so that maybe to use this tool and this moment to convey some messages through this tool.
Very good, Thomas. Well, okay, just to wind things up on a sort of positive note as well, I think there's definitely an ambition and an increased recognition of the importance of resilient biodiversity towards human public health and also the health and well-being of our natural environment. So if that is the one good thing that can come out of this horrible period, then bravo. And let's see how we can realize those ambitions and ensure that we can maintain and secure importance of a healthy environment for us all. We'll see. Okay, well, thank you all very, very much. It's been a very interesting discussion. I'd like to give a quick thanks to Thomas. That was a marathon presentation. And the recording will be available on the EUROPARC website, and also we'll make sure that will include the presentation as well. So that also means it will be available for those who haven't been able to join in live, so they can watch the recording as well. Okay, so thank you very much, Thomas.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you to everyone. It was a pleasure. It was really nice and fruitful also from my side. So I'm really
very
happy.
good. Very good. And thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a good weekend. See you again at the next webinar. Bye.
Ciao.